White women, especially those in the middle and upper middle class, cannot be made to feel uncomfortable, or heaven forbid, the walls will come crashing down. Hi, welcome to Misfit Grit, and we're going to talk about that today. It's going to be patterns of the privileged, passive-aggressive avoidance, as well as processing apples. Stay tuned. The other day I came across a video in my feed, and it's from a doctor, and she does research on sociological issues, and she's talking about how the evidence shows that the higher in income you go, the higher in class, particularly if you're engaging in the white upper middle class or even white middle class, those people cannot have direct conversation, and instead they engage in passive aggressive issues. Now, anyone knows me, they know that I have a bit of a bone to pick with this bougie white upper middle class. I really don't get on with them well. In fact, I've lost friends just by speaking my mind about that culture. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it in the garden. But first, go ahead and take a little gander at what we've been doing this week with apples. It's fall, and we're going to process them down, eat them for supper. And then if you're wondering who these little folks are, these are our newly hatched black slate turkeys. And they just hatched out of the incubator. And we're just letting them get going, dipping their beaks in with water, and hoping that they'll make it. That's a lot of apples. That's all I've been doing. I'm juicing them down, making different fruit sauces, adding plums and pears and blueberries and whatever else comes in the kitchen, and canning those up for the kids this winter. You also saw us having our homegrown and homemade kielbasa. Oh my goodness, so good. And some baked apples and potatoes and cabbage. Oh, that's my kind of food indeed. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm not really one of those pumpkin spice ladies. I don't get into fall that way. I'm not that kind of white lady. My boots are not the, not of that fuzzy variety, whatever they wear. Mine are for the farm. So let's talk about those pumpkin spice ladies and what this research shows. And I'm going to pick some produce in the garden because today is Friday when I'm filming this, and it's Pizza Party Friday. I got to get this stuff ready to go. All right. Speaking of pumpkin spice, let's talk about bougie white ladies and the culture that they cultivate and play right into. So the other day I came across a video, and this woman researches this phenomenon of how the higher in income you go in class, the less able you are to engage in direct communication styles, and instead what you will then do is become passive aggressive. And everyone is expected to engage in this communication style. This is why I don't get on really well with these ladies, because I'm really direct. I don't have a lot of time to bullshit like they do. I gotta get things done. And this was such an amazing find for me and for others as well, because a lot of us have been made to feel like it's our fault that we don't conform to their culture well enough. I'm a working class woman. My husband is a mechanic. We own a small mechanic shop, as well as we run a farm, and we live financially below the poverty line. However, that doesn't mean that if I have concerns or thoughts or anything that they're not valid. But boy, are we made to feel like we are disposable and we should be of service to the women who are of a higher class than us. So instead of engaging in direct conversation styles, what the bougie middle class does is they do passive aggressive. So indirect methods of getting what they want. And what they really just want is the rest of us to shut up. Because if we're going to talk about the things that upset us, like if we have a grievance or an issue, that could possibly make them uncomfortable. It could possibly threaten their own situation, their sense of power, their sense of security. And what these people, and women in particular, cannot be made to do is feel uncomfortable. So that means they have an extremely low distress tolerance. And that goes from like their physical comfort, like these women cannot hack it. They need climate controlled all the time. And they also cannot be made to be mentally uncomfortable. It is a huge affront to ask a woman of the bougie culture to do any kind of mental or psychological heavy lifting. She just won't do it. She refuses, and she won't meet your eye, and she will always pass the buck to someone else if possible, and then she will make sure to punish the person who has asked her to do some like psychological work. She will punish through passive aggressive methods. So instead of engaging in direct communication styles, the bougie white woman and those who follow this culture, they go passive aggressive. So they might use sarcasm, they might use different avoidant techniques, they certainly will not address your issues, and they're going to try to engage in shaming in indirect ways mostly. They're probably going to yap a lot, gossipy stuff. You know, these women are not known for their kindness and decency. In fact, they're downright jerks most of the time. It doesn't really matter where they fall on the political spectrum, too, I've found. And this is something I was talking about in the previous video that I made, where I was talking about class issues. And this was before I had seen the video that I'm going to link down below with this research. And, you know, I've been very wounded by the dismissive behavior of this bougie class. And it doesn't really matter if you're like the head of an institution and you're, you know, living on the water and you know, having your wine time and you're just really up there in that bougie world. Or if you're like a bratty little tanky that hides behind a computer screen whose mommy and daddy pays for everything still. The through line is that these folks have checkbooks that can largely solve their problems and shut people up. And this generation over generation, as well as like, I sense a lot of it from being a Western European style culture. I live in an area that's very cold and stoic. And so I wonder if that has something to do with it, like the WASPs, you know, the white upper middle class, whatever all that is. I think that there must be something going along with that, because working class people and people of color, we tend to be able to hash out our differences in a lot easier ways and hold space for differences that people of the upper middle class, the bougie ones, just can't do. And so I was talking in my previous video about how I see the resistance movement being led, at least where I live, by these bougie people, and those of us in the working class see no reason for us to even show up because we're not welcome, we're not wanted, and our ideas or anything basically that we say that isn't in direct service to those who are of the higher class, it's completely unwanted. And the data, I think, backs that up. And I think there's a lot of people that feel the same way. So it's not just in the resistance movement that a lot of us try to get away from these folks. I have left a lot of different, friend groups. I grew up in the middle class, although we were kind of like the bumpuses on the street, in the neighborhood. we always had rusted trucks in the yard, and we heated with wood, and my dad was always butchering a deer, and we were also fighting, and the police were always called and things like that. It was a very abusive household. So we were kind of like the black sheep on the block, which brought in a lot of shame upon my siblings especially. And as soon as I left home at 17, my parents sort of inherited some money, I guess, and they have risen economically in status. And my siblings really adopt this same mentality of like, they just can't be bothered with anything that could possibly be uncomfortable because they are definitely entitled to their comfort at all times. I have very little contact with anyone from my family of origin because no one is willing to address the issues that I have been upset about for 30 plus years now, which is, trauma and abuse, as well as, generational trauma that isn't being addressed. So these folks prefer to sweep issues under the rug, to use different manipulation and passive-aggressive tactics to weave these webs, these confusing webs that gaslight the person with the grievance into thinking that it's our fault, that we are the ones that just can't get in line with the program, and it's your fault that you don't get along with anybody. I have come up toe-to-toe. Actually, I do not go toe-to-toe with these people because they won't even show up when I invite them to have the conversation. But these people are kind of the bane of my existence, and they drive me nuts. I am so glad that research is being done on this topic so that we can talk about it more, and it can help those of us who do prefer to be direct, do prefer to put it on the table. Let's resolve our differences. Hey, let's hold space for different cultures, different opinions, dissent. Let's create space where people can have conflict resolution. Right? In order to resolve conflict, you have to first admit that there is some. And these folks won't even admit that there is some half of the time. They really just want to sweep it under the rug because, again, their privilege has always allowed them to do that. But for those of us who live more on the margins, and wherever you find yourself, working class, a person of color, whatever it may be, we have to have a lot more tenacity, grit. A lot of us have street smarts. We can read the room really quick. We know when we're being patronized, when we're being disrespected, and we have developed that distress tolerance. We can be uncomfortable and hold space with it and not crumble into a whining mess that uses passive-aggressive techniques to try to get our way, throwing temper tantrums all the time. So my best advice, if you find yourself in a situation where the people of the bougie are not going to listen to your just grievance or your issue or concern or thought or idea, and they're shutting you down, nail your feet firmly to the floor, my friend, because you are not alone. We are in this together, and there are others who see it too. I don't know how to get them to listen. I usually just leave because of the disrespect that they hold for so many people. And that's why I created this channel. It's slow and steady over here. I know I'm not very great with my tech skills, but if you're someone who would like to create a different paradigm where we can hold space for all of us to be actual whole human beings, not just living in like this scared, constantly triggered version of ourselves, but really trying to get into depth and what we could do better for our society, please like and subscribe and share this video. It really helps the algorithm. I hate playing into all that, but that's the name of the game. I really appreciate all of you who have stuck around as I fumble with these videos. It's harvest season, very busy, hoping to learn a few more tech skills this winter when we're inside in our cozy little home with the fire going and I'm not so busy processing apples, because I'm sure there'll be more that show up tomorrow. I'm also trying to find tomatoes because mine look like this. But we're going to fry them up as fried green tomatoes. Because even though we live on the shores of Lake Superior, we can still pretend to be Southern once in a while. I'm like half Texan, actually. It's true. I am. My mom's originally from Texas, so I do know how to cook that kind of food too. So, all right, folks, I hope that eases some of your discomfort out there if you're feeling it with these people, and keep on keeping on, because this was a really big boost to my confidence in the last week, and I'm hoping to spread the word that we are not the crazy ones here. We're trying to make a go of it, and it's good to be direct. It's good to have productive conflict, and there are resolutions that can be used, and it's those folks that don't want to engage in that are actually the problem, and they're trying to codify their power, right? They want those institutions to keep them in power for as long as possible, to keep them as comfortable for as long as possible, because otherwise they might have to be uncomfortable, and that could be really hard. All right, folks, take care.